Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul.
Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane. We're glad to have you with us. UUCS is a welcoming congregation, and we appreciate your unique backgrounds, beliefs, or lifestyle. If you're one of our longtime members or have been here a short time, or if you're joining us today for the first time, we're delighted to have you with us. We also appreciate those of you who are streaming or Zooming with us. It is our mission to join together to create a liberal religious home and to champion justice, diversity, and environmental stewardship in the wider world. Or in short, to create community, find meaning, and work for justice. I am your lay leader, Lisa Conger, and with me this morning is our guest speaker, Liz Moore, Executive Director of the Peace and Justice Action League, also known as PJALS. I will more formally introduce her prior to her presentation. I have a couple of announcements. First, Deb Jackman is not here, but Mary Ann Winifred has ably taken the spot for this morning, and we thank her for doing that. And also, the Board of Trustees would like to remind you to return your email survey if you haven't done so already. They are seeking your input about our congregation becoming a charter member of the North American Unitarian Association. So please take a few moments now to greet one another and connect and say hi to someone you haven't met yet. we'll have more time to greet one another and share our stories over coffee or tea after the service. We now turn from our informal greeting of one another to formally begin our service by lighting our chalice, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism, the symbol of our unity and solidarity, of our openness and inclusion, of our community and individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world and a beacon of hope to those in need. And may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost. Our opening reflection this morning is a poem I wrote in 2005, which I think speaks much to the themes of this morning's service. I was inspired by a piece of art I saw in a gallery showing art by visually impaired artists. This was an abstract piece that made me think of a washing machine with dominant colors of red, white, and blue. It will all come out in the wash. The white t-shirt of peace, the blue jeans of justice, and the red bandana of liberty tumble together in the wash of our world. What is being laundered? The t-shirt is old and thin, stained now with the sweat of protesters bearing heavy signs and banners. The jeans are torn at the knees, worn through from working in the community garden, and patched many times by calloused hands. The bandana is faded now, from miles of street marches protecting the head of a worker or wiping away tears from a tired face. Can we ever come clean? These colors are bleeding in the hot water of war and political turmoil, bleached by the media through endless spin cycles of permanent press. The machine gone urgently berserk. The control knobs click only to the right, while the detergent of false cheer clouds and dims these fabrics of hope. These are the clothes we take comfort and pride in, their holes made holy by our acts and by our allegiance to their ideals. Though they be tattered rags, we are called upon to wear them again and again until they are not simply garments hung out to dry, but prayer flags of truth and transformation.
So for this Martin Luther King celebration Sunday, we are going to sing some gospel music. So please rise as you are willing and able and sing with enthusiasm. Number 153, or it's up here.
Each time we gather as a congregation, there are always those who are with us in our minds and hearts, and who we want to wrap in our love and care. We kindle light this morning once again for all those suffering in Russia and the Ukraine. Let us share a moment in silence, embracing others who are here in our hearts this morning. You are welcome to say their names aloud as you are willing. Those named aloud and those remembered in the silence, and all those who are suffering elsewhere in our world this hour, we hold in our community of compassion. We now gratefully give and receive this morning's offering, which sustains this community and its mission to the larger world.
Good morning. It's time for our story for all ages. So if you would like to join me up front, you are more than welcome to come sit here on the floor or on the chairs, or you can stay where you are. Stephanie, our religious education teacher, is not with us today. She is actually taking a class for dance teachers to learn more about Russian, Hungarian, and Romanian folk dancing. And if all goes well, she said, that we might get to see some of her dancing, Hungarian dancing, next month at our partner church Sunday. So that should be fun. At the first service, we noticed Todd's not here, Deborah's not here, Stephanie's not here. So we thought maybe we just have a big party. But Stephanie did send along a story for us to read today, and it's called The First and the Last. Who here knows from experience that life is not fair? Raise your hand. We know this, don't we? Life is just not fair, and I really don't think it ever has been. But what can we do? We generally just shrug and accept it. It's just not fair. But there was once a man who refused to just shrug off the injustices of the world. Life was not fair, but that was not okay for him. This man was a great and wise teacher and also a prophet. You probably have heard his name. Millions of people around the world are inspired by his teachings. His name was Jesus. Jesus stood up and spoke out and fought for fairness and justice. In fact, he said something about this which is quite curious to me. He said, "The last shall be first, and the first shall be last." Yeah. The last shall be first, and the first shall be last? I'm not entirely sure what he meant by this, and my guess would be that there are several meanings that it might have. But I've got an idea of one way we might understand this. We might understand it if we can think of what it feels like to be first and what it feels like to be last. So let's think about this. To help us understand what it feels like to be first, maybe you've had this experience yourself, or maybe you can just imagine it. How does it feel, do you think, to be first, to be best, to be number one, to come out on top, to have the most? What do these things feel like? What do you think? Good. Great. Scary. Okay. Now let's think about, what does it feel like to be last? What does that feel like, do you think? How does it feel to be the worst? To be on the bottom? To have the least? To have hardly anything, perhaps just crumbs or nothing at all? What do you think that feels like? Bad. Sad. Angry. Resentful. Mad. Want to run away. Jealousy. Depressed. Thank you for sharing something with us about the feelings of being first and being last. You see, I think that fairness and justice might have a chance if the people who know what it feels like to be first, because they've been first so much that they're familiar with it, if these people can come to understand what it feels like, what it really feels like to be last. And I think the world might come to start to become a little more fair and balanced for everyone if the people who already know too well what it feels like to be last, because they are so often last, they so often come in at the bottom and have the least. If these people can come to know what it feels like for a change to actually come out on top, to be first for a change, I can imagine that if those who are usually last and those who are usually first could share the feelings in their experiences with one another, that each might begin to experience a transformation. I believe that when we can share our feelings with one another in a way that is kind, and when we can listen to one another in trust and with compassion, that we can begin to transform one another on the inside. And when we start to be changed on the inside, we will begin to act differently in the world. And we will act more and more and more for justice. Jesus believed that a just society was possible. It would, he taught us, create heaven right here on earth. And maybe heaven means being together to celebrate our feelings of joys, of being first, and sharing the sadness we might have if we are feeling least, last, or lost. Now we'll sing our children out.
I invite you now to settle in for our time of meditation in words and silence. This meditation is adapted from Reverend Alice Naisman. Find a comfortable, receptive posture, close your eyes if you wish, and take in some deep breaths. Let us simply breathe together as we hold our hearts open. Breathing in as our hearts fill with compassion. Breathing out as we pray for healing in our world and in our lives. Breathing in, opening ourselves to the transforming power of love. Breathing out as we pray for peace in our world and in our lives. Breathing in as we hold hope in our hearts. Breathing out as we pray for justice in our world and in our lives. May we know our strength. May we be filled with courage. May our love flow from us into the world.
To All Get Free Together by Chris Crass. To become an anti-racist faith community, the key question for a white or white majority community is not, how do we get people of color to join our faith community? It is instead, how can we make a prolonged, spiritually rooted, engaged commitment to uprooting white supremacy within our community and take ongoing collective action to challenge it in society? Our goal is not to have white people sit alongside a person of color so as to affirm that those white people aren't racist. Our goal is to build and be part of beloved community, united to end structural oppression and unleash collective liberation in our faith communities, schools, neighborhoods, workplaces, and throughout society. Our goal is to join hands across the division of racism in our faith and in our communities and affirm the humanity in each other. Our goal is to join our hearts and minds to the task of destroying white supremacy in every worldview, policy, law, institution, and governing body of our society. For our faith communities to be places of healing from the nightmare of racism that haunts people of color and white people. For our faith communities to be places of nourishment, sustaining the multiracial struggles of our people to advance economic, racial, and gender justice. For our faith communities to be part of the continual process of working within the movement as part of the journey to end oppression in society. For our faith communities to raise our children of all backgrounds to be freedom fighters and practitioners of liberation values. Our goal is for our faith communities to be spiritually alive, learning from and contributing to liberation cultures and legacies. For our faith communities to be welcoming homes for people of all colors, sexualities, classes, ages, abilities, genders, and citizenship statuses. For our faith communities to regularly invite us into and prepare us for courageous action for collective liberation, held in loving community for the long haul. May our faith communities be active agents in the world to help us all get free together.
Excuse me. Liz Moore began her activism in PJALS youth group as a Deer Park High School student after looking up peace in the phone book. She worked as an organizer and educator in unions and community groups on issues including marriage equality, racial justice, and worker rights before returning to the organization that helped shape and define her work as a young activist. She is passionate about grassroots leadership development and supporting youth as leaders. In all that she does, Liz holds fast to the belief that everyday people have the power to build a just and nonviolent world. Welcome, Liz.
Well, good morning, and thank you so much for inviting me and hosting me this morning. I want to begin by respectfully acknowledging that we are on Indigenous land. Specifically, we are occupying the traditional lands of the Spokane people and other interior Salish peoples who have stewarded this land since time immemorial. I want to offer my respect to elders both past and present. In our PJALS community, we are committed to intentionally addressing the outcomes of the doctrine of discovery with the truth about the human beings who were already here and who continue to resist the impacts of ongoing colonization, fighting to sustain their culture, language, and people. And we know it is insufficient to simply acknowledge the land that we occupy. We commit to centering the voices, leadership, and solutions of Indigenous people in our communities and around the world. We stand in solidarity with Indigenous peoples who are leading the fight to protect our planet's biodiversity across the globe. We encourage giving financial support to Indigenous-led organizations here in the land of the interior Salish peoples, to buy native, and to integrate the essential voices of Indigenous people in our lives all year long, because our words are only as meaningful as our actions. And I also want to begin by acknowledging deadly and dehumanizing anti-Black racism. In particular, I want to say the name of Keenan Anderson, who is a Black man who died on January 3rd from cardiac arrest after being tased multiple times by the Los Angeles police. He was a 10th grade English teacher and father of a 6-year-old son who lived in Washington, D.C. and who was visiting family in Los Angeles for the holidays. In the words of Ella Baker, as voiced by Sweet Honey in the Rock, we who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes, until the killing of Black men, Black mothers' sons, is as important as the killing of white men, white mothers' sons. So I'm very honored to be with you today on the weekend that we honor the life and vision of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I'm feeling very humble to be speaking about racial and economic justice today with you. And I'm holding the need to center and listen to directly impacted people, as well as holding the role of white people to engage in the work of racial justice and not just leave it to Black, Indigenous, and people of color. There are 4 key recognitions that frame my thinking and action around racial justice that I want to share with you. The first is that we live in a highly racialized society, that race matters in our society. When we look at any measure of social or economic well-being, whether that's income, education, health, criminal justice, life expectancy, a racial fault line runs through every single one. Indeed, there is not a single social economic indicator in which there is not a disparity based on race. It is 100%, including poverty. In our society, most of the time when we talk about race or racism, we focus only on individual bigotry or individual actions. Instead, we should also focus on the systems that continue to create results showing this racial fault line of disparity based on race. Recognition number 2 is that we're all part of the picture. As a white person, I've been conditioned to view racism as something that happens to other people. Like, I'm walking through an art museum, and there on the wall is a painting titled "Racism in the US," and I'll stand over here and look at it. But in reality, we're not looking at the picture, we're in the picture. Third, none of us asked for this. None of us are responsible for the past, but all of us share responsibility for the present and the future. And fourth, as we talk about racial equity, racism always continues to play out. So I want to talk with you today about shifting from a stance of opposing racism because it's the right thing to do, or because we want to be seen by ourselves or others as one of the good white people, instead to shifting to a stance of understanding working for racial justice as a strategic imperative. Well, what do I mean by that? As we look around, we see we live in the heart of hotly contested territory right here. Whether we're talking about our neighbors without homes, reproductive rights, or the ballot measure for a new jail, our Spokane region is in struggle over who belongs, who is seen as worthy, who's seen as dangerous, and who's seen as deserving of safety and personhood. And of course, it's not just local. The United States has been rocked by threats to democracy itself, and white nationalism, neo-fascism, and antidemocratic movements are on the rise both here and around the world. The challenges we face in our region are a microcosm of the challenges we face as a country and as a world community. And under the surface, if we just scratch it a little bit, most of those conflicts are rooted in racism and economic injustice. Certain politicians exploit racist rhetoric to divide and distract, while they rig government and the economy for themselves and their big money donors. They get richer, the mass of us get poorer, and the power of government is turned against communities of color. In our PJALS community, we are united in knowing that everyday people can accomplish extraordinary things together. We know we can fight back and win. Together, we are rejecting messages of racism, fear, and division from the reactionary rich to join together with people from all walks of life so that we can ensure all our communities get good housing and better schools, not more barbed wire, and more living wage jobs, not more jails. In order to do this, we use three key principles that I'd like to share with you. First, in order to build a movement big and powerful enough to win and to transform structures of power, we need to use a strategy to tackle racism that is race explicit but not race exclusive. We must be explicit about naming race and racism. The greedy few at the top are using racism strategically to point the finger of blame at Black people, Muslims, and new immigrants, with the goal of dividing us so that they can defund our schools, attack healthcare, attack our bodily autonomy, and more, so that they can increase their own power and line their own pockets. They're using dog whistle messaging, which uses words like code. If you think of how a dog whistle works, humans can't hear it, but it reaches a very specific audience, dogs, who then hear it and react to it, right? And they are also using what we call foghorn messaging that everybody can hear. It's not subtle at all. So we have to have an explicit strategy to counter the strategic racism of the greedy few. That means building our collective skill and willingness to name race and to name racism. It means consciously choosing to make decisions in ways that explicitly consider equity, to explicitly and consistently listen to impacted people, to pay attention to disparities, and to create specific strategies to address and remove barriers, to analyze the potential impact of decisions, and to build in accountability measures to see if we're having the impact we intend to have. And it means that naming race is not enough. We also have to name class, gender, and other ways that systems of exploitation exploit us and divide us. But because we are so strongly conditioned not to talk about race and racism, we have to be explicit about naming it. So explicit but not exclusive is one key strategic principle we use with regard to racial justice. The second strategic principle is to focus on impact, not just intention. Focusing on impact allows us to deepen our understanding on how race and racism are actually playing out in situations despite good intentions. Systemic racism will continue to thrive regardless of the intention behind a policy or practice. It matters much more to address the impact on people and communities of color. A third strategic principle, and the one I want to focus on the most, is to tie our racial equity work to our mission or purpose, not just to morality. We know that organizations struggle to integrate racial equity into their work, and often the racial justice work can get lost if the only organizational push comes from a few people who believe it's the right thing to do. As we know, racism plays a role in every sector and every kind of setting. So in order to advance a race equity culture, we need to move beyond a few good intentions and connect racial equity work to our commitment to our organizational missions. We will not be successful unless we pursue racial equity. An easy example to understand this is to look at the Spokane School District. Their mission is educational excellence for everyone. But we can see that it is impossible to achieve educational excellence for everyone without addressing the institutional policies and practices that negatively impact students of color. It won't work. Similarly, our PJALS mission is to build a just and nonviolent world. And that mission is impossible to achieve without addressing the ways that institutional and structural racism create injustice and violence, without addressing the ways that racism manipulates support for war, without addressing the ways that racism manipulates support for new jails, without addressing the ways that racism manipulates support for funding, cutting taxes and funding military spending while leaving communities without resources. So in our PJALS community, we are committed to naming racial justice as a strategic imperative for our organization. The more we recognize and communicate how the reasons for centering racial justice are imperative for our mission, vision, and organizational values and strategies, the more critically important it feels to everyone in the organization at every level, and the more powerful we can be together, and therefore the more effective. Here's an example of how that works in practice. Our organizing priorities are based on member surveys and decided by our steering committee. And our priorities continue to be ending mass incarceration and systemic racism in our city, county, criminal legal system, countering white nationalism, and education for action on racial justice and grassroots organizing, and our Young Activist Leaders Program. And on that note, let me divert from the topic for just a moment to say that we are now hiring youth organizer interns for paid internships to participate in our Young Activist Leaders Program and then to also help run it and coordinate it. So if you know someone ages 15 to 22 who might be interested in putting their social justice passion into action with us, please check our website, peacejustice.org, or talk with me, and I'd love to share more information with you, because it's happening now. So back on topic, last year we launched a new program called Building, Organizing, Leadership Development, or BOLD, which is about advancing all of these organizational priorities at once. In BOLD, volunteers complete a 5-part academy on race and class, how race and class operate together, and effective ways to talk about them. Then volunteers go talk to strangers about race and class and just break all kinds of rules about, not doing those things, right? And I should say, you're not required to do that, right? We actually have no power to make volunteers do anything. Once you complete the academy, then you are eligible to sign up to go talk to strangers about race and class if you choose. So we use a method called deep canvassing, which has been proven effective around the country, and it really comes down to a method, a roadmap for having real conversations about taboo topics to engage people in voting and other ways to make our voices heard collectively. In the BOLD Academy, we spend a good bit of time talking about dog whistle politics, and I'm going to quote from Ian Haney-Lopez to go a bit into this because it is such a powerful weapon that is used against our visions that we need to understand it more deeply. So dog whistle politics allows politicians to use words like codes to promote social hatreds, especially racism, but not only racism, while pretending that they honor equality. A common example of dog whistle racism that we hear both nationally and locally is to talk about criminals or crime, to play on anti-Black racist stereotypes that we hold because of the ways that we are conditioned to hold implicit racism. Dog whistle politics use racism and hate to manipulate support for political agendas that put us all at risk while turning the power of government against communities of color. Ian Haney Lopez explains it's essential to be explicit to counter dog whistle racism. And here's a bit of a quote from him. Racial division is the most powerful weapon wielded by the right. Pretending not to notice that weapon guarantees defeat. And I'm just going to read that again because I think that's really important. Racial division is the most powerful weapon wielded by the right. Pretending not to notice that weapon guarantees defeat. Take climate change. Koch Industries is the largest privately held petrochemical conglomerate in the United States, and their owners have led the fight to limit environmental protection laws. But how have they done so, especially during the Obama administration, which promised a new day for protecting the planet? The Koch brothers funded the Tea Party movement. Opposition to Obama built around fear of a black president and hysteria about Muslims, immigrants, and African Americans. In other words, the main tactic of the leading industrial polluters has been to fund racial anxiety and racist outrage. I'm going to say that again too. That's the bottom line here. The main tactic of the leading industrial polluters has been to fund racial anxiety and racist outrage. If greedy elites can see clearly that racial division consistently defeats those of us demanding that the government work for people and the planet, shouldn't we? So our next round of the Bold Academy starts in March. It'll be on Monday nights, and you are invited to be part of it. You can find, if you're on our email list, you'll get an email about it this week. If you're not, you can visit our website, peacejustice.org/bold, or just peacejustice.org, and you'll see it on the homepage. Bold is very important this year when we are facing the Kearns-French countywide ballot measure in November, where voters will vote whether to to raise sales tax to fund a new jail. As you all probably know, jail is the most expensive and least effective way to achieve community safety and wellness. African Americans are 2% of the county population, but are disproportionately over-incarcerated at 12% of the jail population. Native Americans are less than 2% of the county population, but are over-incarcerated at 7% of the jail population. 70% of the people in the jail are there pre-trial. They have been convicted of nothing. They are presumed innocent, and they are there on low-level charges, and they are there because they can't afford bail. If they had more money in their pocket, they would be out of jail. That's what's happening in our county jail. And that systemically racist, systemically classist institution cannot be allowed to expand. And I have no doubt that that conversation, that struggle, that fight will be a centerpiece of the city election races for mayor and for council president that'll also be on the ballot this year. With certain politicians and wealthy donors using the old tried and true dog whistle racism, strategically playing on fears and prejudices to manipulate voters in order to rig our economy to line their own pockets and advance their own power. So, it's a particularly important year for us to organize in ways that are race explicit, not race exclusive, to look at impact, not intentions, and to understand that addressing racial justice is a strategic imperative if we want to have this community and this country work for everyone and not just for a few at the top. So I've shared 4 recognitions, 3 strategic principles, and a snapshot of our PJALS work. And finally, I'd like to share a few reflections from my own learning journey in my own anti-racist development. First, I learned the principle of relationship before task. In our dominant white supremacy culture, the norm is to focus on the task or the ask, getting the job done. What are the results? What are our deliverables? What can we measure this week, right? Before and without building any kind of relationship. If we use that approach in racial justice work, if we use that approach between PJALS and organizations based in communities of color, it's usually a form of extracting value, in the same way that mining extracts what's valuable and leaves behind nothing but toxicity. So relationship before task, both in terms of priority, what's more important, and in terms of just actual sequencing of events, is a shift from leading with asking people of color to join our projects to instead showing up ourselves consistently when we see an opportunity or a request. It means not making our allyship conditional on how we are received. It means building a track record of being trustworthy before making the ask of a person of color to join our efforts. Second is an approach called conscious use of self that's been really important for me. This means discerning when it makes sense for me to speak or to take action and when it doesn't, based on my entire being, based on my social identities, based on my conditioning, based on how I have relationships with other people. It means learning, for example, how to hear feedback without defensiveness, but instead with actual curiosity. And I would like to note that I'm not saying I have learned this, I'm saying I am learning this process, and it honestly varies. How many times I can manage to just be quiet, and how many times I can actually have some curiosity that's genuine when I hear some feedback. So it also means understanding that white people shouldn't need to be stars or heroes for our racial justice work. To quote Ella Baker again, we can be just one in a number as we stand against tyranny. Not that we play small, but that we show up and do what we can, all that we can, without seeking glory for it. Third is a principle that I both have learned and am learning, which is about acting from commitment and not from perfectionism. Our old friend perfectionism, one of the greatest hits, right? At my very first racial justice training, trainers Tema Oken and Kenneth Johnson told us that we can't just plan on being perfect allies. We have to be committed even knowing we will make mistakes. Devastating, excruciating. Not what I wanted to hear. I just thought, I'll just be a perfect ally. That's my plan. So perfectionism is pretty deep in our white supremacy culture conditioning, right? That's the standard, just do everything right. Being, as a white person working for racial justice, it is not a linear process of just perfection ongoing. It is much more like a spiral. And that means that I do my best to build relationships, to learn what would actually be useful, to think about strategy, to think about accountability, and then take some action that's based on that best thinking and that best communication. Sometimes that's great, sometimes that's useful. Other times it's a mistake, other times it does harm. And I get feedback, either spoken or experiential. And then it means doing what I can to learn from that spoken or experiential feedback, and doing my best, doing what I can to repair harm that I've caused, as long as it takes to do that, which in some cases we're looking at a decade of repairing relationships, because the harm can be very real. While continuing, in the meantime, my own individual or organizational work, not stopping until everything's fixed and then coming back. Because our commitment has to be real and unconditional and not based on, really not based on success. It's really about being steadfast in commitment. And fourth, wonderful, freeing, liberating piece, which is to be fierce against oppression and loving with myself and my comrades. Right? Because gritting our teeth and tensing up and charging into a situation, that works in certain situations, right? There's some strength in that sometimes. And we can also access ways of being that make learning easier, that make risk-taking easier, that create more internal spaciousness, that make real relationships easier, that help us show up with less shame when we make mistakes, that allow us more joy in our movement building. And what could be more strategic than that? So to close on that note, I want to share some words from Paul Kivel. We move towards healing, love, interdependence, and justice. Love yourself. Love your body. Love your sexuality, gender expression, and gender identity. Love your sexual orientation and those it leads you to. Value all forms of diversity. Recognize multiple truths. Act cooperatively. Don't proselytize. Be humble. Expand the possibilities. reject duality, challenge hierarchy, withhold condemnation, honor alternative paths, let go, live harmoniously with nature, work for restorative and transformative justice, live simply, extend your circle of caring to all people, extend your circle of caring to all life, recognize the spirit in all things, use words responsibly, find joy and pleasure in your life, return the land to native peoples, live lightly in the world, align and move with the rhythm of the seasons. Remember that children are sacred. Remember that children are sacred. Align and move with the rhythm of the seasons. Live lightly in the world. Return the land to native peoples. Find pleasure and joy in your life. Use words responsibly. Recognize the spirit in all things. Extend your circle of caring to all life. Extend your circle of caring to all people. Live simply. Work for restorative and transformative justice. Live harmoniously with nature. Let go. Honor alternative paths. Withhold condemnation. Challenge hierarchy. Reject duality. Expand the possibilities. Be humble. Don't proselytize. Act cooperatively. Recognize multiple truths. Value all forms of diversity. Love your sexual orientation and those it leads you to. Love your sexuality, gender expression, and gender identity. Love your body. Love yourself. Thank you.
For our last hymn of the day, number 116, I'm on my way. Another gospel song, so I'll be belting it out. I hope you will join me. It's Rise as You're Willing and Able. I'm on my way to the freedom land. I'm on my way to the freedom land. I'm on my way to the freedom land. I'm on
Our benediction today is by Jim McGaw. It's entitled, Go in Peace, Seeking Justice. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go in mindless oblivion. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go without challenging yourself or others. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go in utter ease and comfort. When I say go in peace, I mean go in peace seeking justice. I mean go in peace committed to equal rights and opportunities for all. When I say go in peace, I mean go in the peace that is created when together we build communities of true solidarity, deep compassion, and fierce, unrelenting love. Go in peace. Amen. Blessed be. Salam alaikum and shalom.